On this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I are discussing why the comparison trap can become problematic as it relates to our quest. Stay tuned.
So what are we doing here today? What are we discussing?
We're talking about
on this week's episode of A Soul's Quest podcast. What are we doing?
That's my part.
Oh, sorry.
So we're talking about comparisons and how. Are you excited?
Yeah,
and how the comparison trap can really mess with our quest.
Yeah, it can. It definitely
it's a
can.
Vicious cycle.
It is a very interesting thing. Yeah, all this stuff is like we have to be aware of it.
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Awareness is half the battle.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for
awareness is half the battle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I'm going to start with the first portion of this episode. I want to start with a quote.
Okay.
So I love my quotes. I've been doing a lot of quotes this season. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're a writer. Anyways, go on.
I put a quote in my book. And I didn't have to thank my writer. I thanked Ralph Waldo Emerson. Thank you very much.
All right, fine.
All right,
go on.
Here's the quote. So, and this is from the Bible.
Yes, it is.
Ecclesiastes. Okay.
Yeah.
I have learned why people work so hard to succeed. It is because they envy the things their neighbors have. But it is useless. It is like chasing the wind. Mm-hmm. It is better to have only a little with peace of mind than be busy all the time with both hands trying to catch the wind. Mm-hmm. That's pretty deep. So what?
Hevel. So the word is hevel, is like air, smoke. Like it's the Hebrew word for what he's trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So elaborate on the quote.
I think I have to kind of like make myself clear. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we talked about materialism, and we're so hyper focused on it, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with, again, power, having that personal power, that personal flexibility to be self-reliant.
We just talked about power.
In our previous episode, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't have issues with that. I don't have the issues with, like I mentioned before in one of the podcast episodes, I don't want to live on the streets or in a shanty home. There's certain things, there's a certain lifestyle that I want. So, because it allows me to do the things. And that is the issue that we have when it comes to comparisons. A lot of the times we look at people and the world provides us models, right? Mm-hmm. And we need those models.
Right. Because
those models in our world represent something to strive for. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's without models, we won't directly know which path to take because everything builds upon the previous stuff that happened. So we need models. The problem arises in which there comes a point in which you can't take the model and try to duplicate it. The model serves as a platform, it's like a scaffolding, so that then you could put your own taste into it. This is like the evolution of music from blues to jazz to rock and roll to hip hop. Like you see that in that projection. It builds on a foundation, right? But then it keeps expanding, and then people make it their own, and their own flavors and their own things come into it. When we live our lives primarily for the focus of, competing with the Joneses, of being better than the Joneses, then we give away our true power. And like this quote says, right? It is useless. It's like chasing the wind. Number one, because you're not really living from the point of view of bringing out what the universe has given you and what's innately inside of you. You're not doing it from that point of creativity. You're doing it primarily for the point of the perceived power and status and that recognition from the other person. So when you do that, you're doing it for something outside of yourself rather than something that is innate inside of you.
Some people might argue, though, that, I my sweat, blood, and tears bought this, $500,000 house or $1 million home, and they're proud of it, and they may think that is power for them, that's something that.
But if I don't have an issue with that, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're doing it because you want to do it.
So not putting yourself, which is something that does happen, is putting yourself in a predicament like, oh shit, how am I going to pay for this house now?
Exactly. Can I afford this? Can I afford this? Number one.
Or am I doing it to show off?
Is this going to give me enough, the freedom, the personal values that I want?
Does it fulfill that?
That I want. But it's easier to say that you got to get to that point, but it is so hard. It is extremely hard to do. Our society is nothing but a constant plaguing of comparisons. It is.
Yeah, you have social media,
stop
TV, commercials.
We don't know our lives unless we are comparing it to someone.
So then, just to play devil's advocate, can comparing ourselves to other people be a conduit to giving us more motivation, inspiring us to do better?
Yes.
To establish goals. Like, gosh, I would love to have a house like that, or, I live in an apartment. My friend just bought a house. Man, I'd really like to that they're living a good life. I think maybe I need to get a house. Like, can comparisons be that?
It can. Again, it's the world. Our environment gives us models to strive for, and those things are important. You need them because it makes you feel, when you look at something over there and say, for instance, growing up, I wanted to live in an apartment.
Right.
I wanted my own place, an apartment and whatever. But I'd be damned right now if I lived the apartment life. That's for the birds, for me. I like, even in a condo, a high rise is like, no. I want to be able to have a backyard. I want to be able to step outside. I don't want to reach out the window and get a cup of coffee from my neighbor. I want a little bit of space, and that's important to me. So, but those are models that you might get to that point, and then you may realize that is all air. It's like chasing the wind. Don't chase the thing. Chase what the thing is bringing you, because even that thing may not. This thing is going to bring me. I'm going to feel good if I live in a mansion. I'm going to feel great if I have the status. If people look at me as if I'm somebody like that, powered invigorates me. That's chasing the wind.
Right. So basically, being able to not necessarily, it's still comparisons, because you're looking at other people's, what you just said examples, right? You're looking at that as something to sort of jump off of, to dive off of.
It's a scaffold.
And build your own life, like saying, well, I want to have a family and I want to have this and that.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it because you want to be better than other people. You're just doing it because that makes you innately happy.
There are certain values that makes us feel on purpose.
Having kids,
being, and again, it's like traditionally we've had all these things, and there's always the argument, well, marriage was dictated upon, and then people choose. 50% of people get divorced and all that stuff. There's arguments for that. But there is something to be said. There is a beautiful thing to having a marriage, to having a partner that you share your life with. Like, we have that relationship. We have our ups and downs. But there is something to know that the experience that you have complete faith and trust in someone, that you both are in it together, that there is something that you share a life with, and there's a priceless thing to that, but again, if you are marrying because it's the pressure, it's because, well, I don't want to be the one left out, It's like you have to understand why. There's beauty in marriage, but sometimes it turns out not to be so good.
Like, why are you doing it? There's a lot of people. I just talked to somebody the other day. I don't want to put the name out there, but he was saying that, he feels that pressure to get married and, sort of do all these things. And in fact, this person recently purchased a house, but it was because he didn't want to for the longest. But then he realized after much research and much gathering of information and listening and things like that, he realized that there might be some benefits in doing this. If I buy a house, I could probably off it later and get money on it. And so he was motivated by that. You know what I mean? And it wasn't because he had to have a house so that he could compare himself to other people, because most people that he knows have houses, And so
again, it's like power. I mean, comparing ourselves to other people is just a starting point, right? First and foremost, let's say I look at someone in a much better financial situation than I am. Let's say a lawyer, right? A lawyer is somebody that has status in the community. A lawyer is one of those professions in our society that is highly looked upon. It's like the pinnacle, right? A lawyer is money and power and that status and respect. A lawyer also works 60 to 70, 80 hours a week. A lawyer doesn't have as much time to spend with their families. They're constantly involved in cases. They're constantly, their time is spent doing a lot of other things relating to their profession, So they don't have that, but they have that. Even athletes, athletes make a whole lot of money, but those guys get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They go into all these trainings and put in their bodies in risk. So are we comparing ourselves to those individuals? It's that the life that we really want, or there's things within what those people do that we want to integrate in ourselves. And you could look at that and compare yourself. Well, they have that. I don't have it. I like to have something like that. So let me learn. I may not want to end up there, or I may want to end up a little bit in a different status, or maybe I want to get further ahead because this is what I want. It's getting to that point. It's not the comparison itself. It's getting to the point of understanding what's in it for me, and how is this going to align with the values that I want for my life? Okay.
So, my next question is, I guess this is sort of like twofold, but the next question that I have is, how do we avoid falling into that trap of comparisons? Because I think that that's sort of something that just, it just happens. I think because we're human and we fall into that trap of sitting in a doctor's office and picking up the magazine and you see Kim Kardashian and she looks perfect or perfect, and I say that in air quotes, or seeing somebody with a nice Michael Kors or Louis Vuitton purse or something, and you want that, or you want this hair, you got to have just things like that. How do you fall into that trap? And then the other question that I have is, do you think that, so these are two questions for you to answer. Do you think that by comparing ourselves to others, we can make, like you just hit on this, but I sort of wanted to dive more into it about making us, do you think that it makes us more self-aware, or that this is another a way for us to dive deeper into that self-exploration of becoming more aware and recognizing in those moments that, yeah, I really want that, but why do I that's becoming self-aware, and how do we do that? So two questions.
Okay, so the first question, let me just try to get this
and you're
right.
being timed.
All right.
No pressure.
The first one is comparing ourselves with other, like a catalyst to help us push ourselves harder, right? Is that the first one?
No, the first question that I had was, what are the tools, like what can we do to not fall into the comparison trap.
Okay.
And then my second question is, do you think that...
Let's start with the first one.
Let's do that.
All right. The first one is, how do
it's
we
too much for you.
avoid... Yeah, it's too much for my little pea brain to handle. How do we avoid falling into the trap?
Yeah, like what
right?
do we... Yeah.
Okay.
Just practical suggestions that you have experienced and whatnot. Yeah.
Okay. So a practical suggestion is this, and I've learned this a couple of weeks ago. There's this principle theory. It's called the sunk cost fallacy.
Okay, what is that?
Right? So the sunk cost fallacy, what it states is the fact that you will get into a point in which the investment that you put in doesn't your initial investment into what you're doing and what you're getting out of it right now doesn't really equate to the effort that you're putting into it. It's not really getting your ROI. You're not really getting out of it what you really put into. So
an example, real quick.
So it's a time to walk away from it. So let's say, for instance, you have a really bad investment, and you put in money, let's say a house, and you put money on this house and put money on this house, but then there's something else and there's something else, and you are beyond your limits in debt. At what point do you say, I got to sell this house just to get out of the way? Mm-hmm. Right? So we have to be aware of that, because you look at all this stuff and you go after, let's say you transforming your body to make it look like a Kim Kardashian, or make it look like someone like that. What is it that you're gaining out of it?
Okay, so
are you gaining attention? Mm-hmm. Are you gaining the right attention? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you and how does that intention feels?
So
when you get to that point and you do all those things, are you really feeling any better about yourself? Because if you're doing it and everybody else is doing it, now everybody start looking the same. So now you're looking just like everybody else. So then at what point do you say, okay, enough is enough? I gotta move. I gotta find another way to make myself feel fulfilled.
And
it's not physical.
Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you have to really be able to examine what you're getting out of that. So if I go get my boobs and my butt and my extensions and lashes and all this stuff done, and I'm feeling like this isn't filling that void. That's what I would call that, a void. I'm not getting the attention that I wanted. I'm not getting the I don't feel like I look as good as I need to. You could either go forward and do more things to transform your look, or you can say, I need to back out. And so what's that?
Yep.
What's that barometer?
I'll give you an example for men, right? When you're young and you want to go out there and you want to, you want to hunt, and you
hunt what?
You know what I mean. And you want to, and this is one of the things, the more women that you have, the more of a man that you
conquer.
You want to conquer, and you want to have those like stripes in your shoulders. Okay. But there comes a point in which if you're a man and you come across this, you're asking yourself, like, again, it's if you have that within you, is it worth it? Like, after a while, it's worth it.
Some men would say yes.
Some men will say yes, absolutely. But what are you giving up instead? Like, that's the thing. It's like you don't see it. You don't see the ROI right away.
Some men might not think that they're giving up.
Yes, you may not. You may feel that you're not giving up, giving anything up, right? But there comes a point in which the emptiness, it's hard to fill.
So eventually that void will be surfaced. It's going to surface at some point.
I think it manifests. I think it manifests more than men are willing to talk about it.
Okay. I was going to say, that was the next thing I was going to say. I think that happens.
But it's important. I mean, this is a perfect example because it is important for a man to have those badges and be able to say, yeah, I did that and I did that and that and that and that and that. It's a form of pride.
Mm-hmm. And just for the record, this doesn't apply to all men, just so that we can put
we're
that
generalizing.
out there.
We're generalizing, but this is something that really happens. And I think men think about this because there is a certain emptiness that comes to it after a while.
Applies to women as well.
It's the same thing with money. You know, it's like going after money for money's sake, as good as it may feel to you, and you're doing it because, well, now the comparisons is like, I'm not a millionaire, I'm a billionaire. It's like, why is that? Why is that so important? Right? It's because it's no longer about what you're doing, about the creativity of what you are doing. It's about the assertion of that's what I am.
Right.
You know, I'm not a simp. So we got to understand that. But you're comparing that. You doing that comparison next to this person because you want to be that person or better than. But I always go back to, like, what is the intent? Mm-hmm. What is the intent? Mm-hmm. You know, that's been I mean, like, that's why I like Elon Musk. You know, I like what he does. It's like he's taking his money and he's like, we want to go to Mars. I don't know what's out there. We want to go. I mean, that's intent. You know what I mean? There's a reason behind it, but a lot of people want to compare themselves to Elon Musk. He's a perfect example of our time, of someone that everybody wants to compare themselves to, right? But he has a clear vision of what he wants, a clear intent. Me comparing myself to him, it'll be moronic, right? But I could look at his passion and his intent and figure out how that looks like in my life, and apply it to that path that I defined, because that's his unique path.
So it's taking elements of other people's, in terms of comparisons, taking elements of other people's quest, and applying it to your own life to better yourself, but having that because you want that's your intention. You want to be better because of this. So, and
you have to be aware to finish answering that question of that sunk cost fallacy. As like, this is now I'm just copying to try to get to that status, or try to be that person. And it no longer becomes your life. So is that what you want? Mm-hmm. So you want a mansion because
you want a fancy
someone
car.
Came to our house, right, and said, so is this your forever home? And I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be a forever home, but I like my house. You know, it's like, okay, it's not shiny and shit, but
it's ours.
Exactly. And it's like, there's no one that bothers. It's your thing. You know, I had someone that used to make fun of my car all the time, right? Like, they called it the tracker and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't care. It's paid off, you know. But it's weird because as a person that is like an immigrant or a Dominican or somebody like that it's almost like in our DNA, like we have to floss. And, you know, it's like, this gets me to where I need to get to.
Yeah.
You know, but but again, it's like we have to look at ourselves and see exactly what is it that we want, you know, and our comparison issues is primarily because we don't want to be looked at as inferior than. We have that fear of being the outsider. So, I mean, I hope that answers your question. You gotta
it does.
You gotta be aware of the sunk cost when it's like, okay, if I'm modeling the aspects of this person, there's a point in which I gotta move forward, and then you also have to be able to understand intent within yourself. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just I think that, you know, this is much easier said than done.
It is,
because there's a lot of influence. There's social media. There's commercials, movies,
Mm-hmm.
People magazine, people.com. And you look at these people and you just want to, I want to, it's interesting because we have, you're in your own relationships, for example, and you'll look on social media or watch, some of these websites or whatever, and you see people who got all their relationships are perfect.
No relationship is
I've
perfect.
never seen so many perfect relationships in my life on social media, because what we do is we put out all the good stuff. We don't put out the bad stuff, right? And who wants to listen to all the bad stuff? We just want to listen to the good stuff. So personally, I don't put anything out there about my relationship. I put a lot of shit out there about my cats, which is ridiculous. But and I just have always found that to be interesting, because I feel like people aren't living their authentic selves when they're doing things like that.
And again, it goes back to the fact that none of us, this is just a fact. None of us wants to be looked at as the other.
Yeah.
As the inferior, as the difference. It goes back to, we just want to belong. In this chaotic world, in this all noisy thing, we all want to belong.
Yeah.
But we also have to now be able, we've done that for a while. Now we have to be able to transcend. It actually goes back to your other question as to how do we deal with this? How do we manage it? Like, first, you have to understand that you are uniquely you. You are a way for the universe to know itself, right? And that takes effort. That takes trial and error. That takes taking parts of other people's personalities, because you can't see 100% totality of what a person is. You could take aspects, like one of the things that I always liked is that I always looked at for models in my life is I love how the mind of somebody like Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, in which they could just tell stories and stuff just without looking at notes. They just know it. Like, I love that part. I love Nelson Mandela's, like, his embodiment of forgiveness. Like having someone blame a system instead of individuals after being oppressed for so long. That's like forgiveness and the embodiment of it.
So, where I think you're going with this, or what you're trying to say, just I have to say this real quick, is that if we're comparing ourselves to people like that because we want to emulate those aspects, those qualities to be a better person, to develop an attitude of gratitude, is what I was saying in the notes or whatever, and being a better person, a more empathic individual, a person who's more forgiving and whatnot. Those are qualities that should be emulated. So
you look at those qualities, right? Because you could say bad things about every single one of those individuals. Bob Marley is somebody that I love how he used music to he said, I'm a revolutionary and I fight it single-handedly with music. And just the spirit of that man in the performance that I've seen video-wise, and just seeing his kid's life is just being that. But you could say something about, he was a womanizer, it was this, it was that. It's like no human being is perfect. But you look at all qualities like that, and you start emulating those qualities and taking those qualities and applying it in your daily life. And then you start seeing things about you. What is life? If you want the house by the water because you like jet skiing and you're like, by all means, that's your thing, go for it.
You start to discover things about yourself. You start to discover
things.
It's a discovery.
You start discovering things. And those things are like little templates that you could cut, paste. And then once you start doing that, then you begin to really start realizing who you are as a person, and your unique talents, your unique stuff. And then you become to be more intentional about what you do. I want to do this because I want to see what happens. I want to create this because I want to put it out there. I want to do this job because I know that it's going to help somebody, or because I am helping in the evolution of the humankind. So you start going from that point. So you have to have that awareness, right? And those are practical things that you could do. But then you have to go back to the quote at the beginning of it all, right? And ask yourself that even that is kind of like smoke, because you might get to a point and you were so focused, so hyper focused on it, and then it may maybe just turn out to be air. Then what are you? You're no longer valuable or defined. And then now when you see yourself in comparison to others, then you're not as good. You're not worthy. Mm-hmm. I do that shit to myself all the time. Yeah. So you got to look at it and just and kind of like realize. But the beautiful thing of it all, right, is the more you get to know about yourself, and like the previous episode, we talked about power, and the more you start living from that point, then you start influencing others. But somehow you got to figure out yourself to be detached from the outcomes.
So basically what you're saying is, then, just to recap this segment, is that we need to sort of be more intentional about what it is that we're trying to, when we're doing comparisons, stop, think about what it is that we're doing. Why are we doing that? What is the intention? And rather than wanting to, if you want the big boobs and the big butt, great. But what is your intention? And why are you doing that, right? And then understanding what your return of investment is, your ROI, right? And then knowing when to cut that off and walk away, cut our losses.
Sunk cost fallacy, yeah.
Right. And then also then to take a different perspective or a different aspect of comparisons and take elements of the situation or another person and apply that to our personal life to enhance our own intentions or to create goals that are attainable, or to have a life that is worth living, or that a moment or a quest that you can embark on that feels sustainable and fills that void, so to speak, or at least that attempt to try to fill that void by discovering yourself and these things about yourself. But you go through these comparisons to discover those things about yourself, right?
Yeah, and I didn't say that it's going to be easy.
Yeah.
I didn't say that it's going to be.
I don't think it'll be easy. It's not easy for us.
But but anything that's worthwhile is not easy.
Yeah. I think it's a daily process, of going through it and really understanding and acknowledging that. I think it sounds really silly, but I think for me, journaling, writing down these things and how certain situations make me feel, and what was that experience, and why am I doing this, and asking myself the reasons why, that really helps me personally. I don't know if, for other people, if that helps. And sometimes it helps to even talk about it. If you have somebody that you can actually be vulnerable with. What
would be kind of cool though? If they could leave us comments and let us know exactly what they think.
That would be great.
I would like to hear that, because again, it's hard if you want to live your own life.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, but it's the premise of our Western society, the freedom for us to live our own lives.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We're constantly in comparisons.
Yeah.
So it's not really uniquely ours,
right,
because of the pressures and all these different moving parts. But you have to be strong enough to not be swayed and live how you want to be lived. If that's a simple life, then by all means. If that is being a lawyer and driving yourself to a career, and that's what you want to do, go for it. The comparisons is number one, what makes us ants, number one. And number two, like the previous episode, the idea of perception of power, because I have this status, I have more power than this person, or then it becomes like, oh, it's all a dance. And you have to be able to be okay with your station in life and be the best that you can be within that station. And if you want to progress, go for it.
That's good. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
All right.
We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you leave us a comment. And for more information, check us out at asoulsquest.com.